Are you ready to start over after Black Friday in the silver market? Well, unless you've been living under a rock or you're not a regular investor in silver, you're very well aware of what happened this last Friday, January the 30th. Silver opened up at about $115, went up as high as $118, and then it fell like a rock all the way to $73.67 before it came back up and settled at about $85. And so we had a $45 trading range that day, and silver literally lost $30, a little over $30. One of the biggest trading days in any market in history, certainly the biggest nominal loss, dollar loss that the silver market has taken in its entire history. And in fact, it nearly traded the entire range of what had been the high of $50 for quite a number of years. So $45 spreads unheard of. It was a day that nobody was prepared for, although I suspect you've probably heard a number of people that said they were more than prepared for it, knew it was going to happen. I'm not really sure, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But for most of us, including a lot of us who've been in the market for over 40 years now, it caught us off guard. And why wouldn't it? There's never been a day like this in history. There was certainly a day in 1980 when the silver market went down, when they changed the rules on how you could trade on the Comex. But again, in a dollar amount, it didn't even approach today's, maybe in a percentage amount. But not that many people were involved in the silver market back then as they are now. And so this was a pretty significant setback for a lot of people. A lot of people have just gotten in the silver market in the last few months. The fear of missing out crowd, or the crowd that wants to get in on the next big investment like Bitcoin or whatever it is, and they started watching the silver market, and maybe they invested in it at about $60 or $70, and it just kept going up, and they thought, wow, this is a market that's going to make me a millionaire, and they just kept buying and buying and buying all the way up, only to find out that this market can go down and go down in a hurry. Well, I'm not laughing at those of you who have suffered loss. I suffered loss myself, but what I'm laughing at is the idea that we don't think that a market can change direction. And it certainly can, and it certainly did. The question now is, what are you going to do? We've experienced Black Friday in the silver market. Where do we go from here, and what do we do? As far as where the market goes from here, there's a number of fundamentals that are still in place. There's a high demand for this metal, not only in industry and commercial, but also amongst various nations. And so there still is a fairly high demand for silver. There is a fairly important delivery coming up in March on the Comex exchange in New York. This March contract is one of the biggest in recent history as far as the consequences that could come as a result of it. The first delivery date is going to be February the 27th, and on that day, I imagine we're going to find out whether or not we're going to have trouble on the Comex or not. I suspect if they are looking towards a big delivery, the Comex is going to start bringing in quite a bit of metal to try and meet the demand for that and head off any problems. But this day on Friday, while it probably gave some of the banks some relief from some of their short positions, it also traded so many contracts on this particular day that there may have been a number of entities that bought at these low prices with the absolute intention to take delivery in March. These low prices for them were just an absolute gift, especially if they had been looking to paying over $100 an ounce on it. Well, if they were able to pick up some more contracts, then now they're able to get it for a lower average cost. A lot of people have wondered, why is February the 27th such a big day? And it's a big day, an important day, specifically because it's the first notice day for the March contract as far as those who intend to take delivery. And so watch that day, watch the news and some of the things that surround it. I wouldn't just watch your typical YouTube channels on this. I'd try and get a rounded viewpoint of this. I'd try and get something that doesn't have a lot of hype on it, because you want to be aware of exactly what's going on. So keep an eye on that date. Right now, the open interest for this delivery has dropped. It was as high as 160,000 contracts, which is 800 million ounces of silver. It's dropped down to 150 million open interest contracts now, and so we're looking at about 750 million ounces. So we're still looking at just slightly less than the total annual mining production as far as open interest on these contracts. We always have a much higher open interest than those who will actually take delivery. But the thing that has changed in the recent year is the fact that so many people are taking delivery off of the Comex exchange that never had done that before. It is delivering now on a much higher scale. And so again, keep an eye on that. You'll have some time to look at things. If you're interested in such matters, go to the CME Group's website and just get on the silver section of that website and explore and look at the different information that they have. I think you'll find it pretty interesting. It'll give you an education that maybe you won't get in other places. But now, I want to get back to this idea. If you were hurt in this, or let's just say you were disappointed, you had a pretty good financial loss, but you weren't playing with money that you had to have to pay the rent or to pay your groceries. It was just part of your investments, and you did take a big loss on that, and you still hold that. Or maybe you panicked and sold, or maybe you didn't panic at all, you just sold in a very rational way. But whatever it is, you experienced a loss. What are you going to do now? And so I wanted to talk about that just for a few moments. I do think that one of the nice things about any type of investment vehicle that we might use is that there is a learning curve on that, and sometimes we can just look at our initial failures, or at least our initial disappointments, more along the lines of paying tuition. When you went to college to learn certain things, you paid a lot of tuition for that. Some of those things turned out to be pretty valuable to you. A lot of them didn't turn out to be very valuable, but the tuition was spent. You may have student loans over that, but it is what it is. There's no use crying over spilt milk. Just deal with it and go on with your life. Well, same thing in the silver market. If you have experienced some disappointment in the last few days and you're ready to get out, by all means, get out. This isn't the market for you. There's no shame in that. You might do very well in some other markets. But if you're determined that you want to remain in this market, I want to give you some ideas as far as not only some of the physical things that we can do to remain in it, maybe in a more prudent fashion, but also a mindset that I think is important for us to have in all areas of life when it comes to investing in the silver market. I've mentioned just about since I started talking about silver on this channel that I have a buy and sell schedule that I use that determines whether or not I'm ready to sell a certain amount of silver or buy back a certain amount of silver. And this helps me to not have to worry so much about the vagaries of the day-to-day market. Or if somebody comes in and just crashes the market, well, I've got a plan for that. And if I just stick with my plan, and I've been doing this for quite a number of years, I found out that it kind of levels out some of these disappointments. It certainly mitigates the losses on one end, and it allows me to take profit on the other end. And it has allowed my wife and I to be able to retire a few years earlier than we normally would have expected to retire, just because we've tried to stick with some prudent things that time has proven actually work. And we've had a lot of failures through the years, but we've had a certain amount of success that's allowed us to repeat that same pattern. And so I just wanted to show you a little bit about what I do as far as buy and sell schedule and what I mean by that. I'm not sure that this is going to show up, but if it does, maybe you can just, if it's in focus, maybe you can just freeze the screen and look at it. But let me explain what it is. On the top left-hand side, it shows what number of sale or transaction that I'm looking at. And then there's a price in the next column. And this particular schedule that I've got goes from $35 to $100 because these are sales that I've already achieved in the last several months. Obviously, last year, silver was $30 an ounce for a long time, and I started selling in 50-ounce increments at $35 an ounce, but I had purchased these ounces at a lower cost, and this was just a portion of what I own. I've mentioned before, I use the silver account as a savings account and an insurance account. There's a certain amount of the silver that I never intend to touch. I hope to pass it on to my children, who are very prudent at the current time, so I'm looking forward to being able to do that. But if there's some sort of emergency in the interim where we need these funds, whether we're talking about a personal emergency for my wife and I or our family, or whether we're talking about a national emergency or a worldwide emergency, we have a certain amount of physical funds set aside to where hopefully we can ride out the storm. And I can tell you, throughout our lives, our married life, my wife and I, we've had a few financial storms, and it's been really nice to have this insurance account to where we could cash it in when we needed to do so, and then we tried to build it back up whenever we had to do that. But let me get back to this chart. Again, in the upper left-hand corner, we're looking at the sales and the number that sale is, looking at the dollar amount of each sale, starting at $35 and going all the way up to $100 is what we've done so far. And the amount that we trade is 50 ounces at each scheduled sell point. And this next column is just the amount, the dollar amount for that specific sale. And then this column is going to be the total amount of ounces that we have sold. And this column is going to be the total dollar amount that we've achieved as far as those sales go. And then the second part, this second half, is our buyback schedule. And on the buyback schedule, I have a very specific plan on when to buy back the silver. When it's the silver I sold at $100 and $95 and $90 an ounce, my goal was to buy that back at $25 an ounce less. So it was going to be bought at $75 for that we sold at $100, bought back at $70 for the $95 sales and $65 for the $90 sales. And we've already bought back a good part of that, but it goes all the way down, and we can just go ahead and restock the silver that we've already sold. Again, I've done this for a number of years. Obviously, at any point on the schedule, I'm going to have certain purchases that have not yet been made, and I'm going to have certain sales that haven't been made. This schedule just shows what we've already sold on the top part, but my sell schedule goes all the way up to $1,000. I don't expect it to get there. I didn't expect it, though, to get to $100 this quickly after just being at $30 about 9 months ago. So things surprise me, and if I have a schedule, I can use that. I've also had opportunities in the past where because I had a buy schedule, I knew if it got down to a certain point, I would buy at that point. When COVID hit and the silver market just dropped out, the bottom dropped out, I was able to get online that night and buy back a lot of silver at that point because that was my buy schedule and it hit that buy point, and so I was able to do that. But because I had a schedule, I had a plan of what I wanted to do, and that's exactly what this schedule does for me. And I buy it back in increments. Right now, the $100 sales, I'm buying back at $25 lower. The $70 sales, I'm going to be buying back at $20 lower. The $50 at $15 lower. The $40 at $10 lower. And the $30, if it gets down to that point, at $10 lower. And so, again, I've got this schedule. I don't expect to see some of these prices ever again. I don't want you to misunderstand having a plan and a schedule for thinking something is going to happen. But because of that, I'm able to just operate by that. I would encourage you to do that as well. And for those of you, again, who have been disappointed with this last Friday, maybe you got hurt a little bit, well, just start over if you are intending to stay in the silver market. Maybe you've already got a certain amount of physical stored up. Just use that as insurance. If you have a house insurance policy and you didn't have a fire last year, you're not weeping and moaning over the fact that you didn't get to use the premium that you paid on that. You just go on with life and are happy that you weren't inconvenienced to that point. Well, you've still got a store of silver. Your life has not changed any unless you had borrowed to pay that silver or you had to sell it in order to pay your bills. And if you've ever done that before, maybe this will teach you, as I have been taught in the past, not to ever use money for an investment that you need to have. You don't ever make an investment with money that you can't afford to lose. I'm not saying that you want to lose it somehow or that it's not going to hurt to lose it. I'm just saying do not invest money that you can't afford to lose. If you invest something, you need to have already got that money in savings, and it's got to be something that's not earmarked for something else, or you're going to suffer certain consequences for that. Now, I think I've got enough time to pass along this old story by Russell Conwell. The analysis is over at this point, so if you want to turn it off, I'll sure understand. But I like this story. It's supposed to be based on a true account, and it gives a little bit of perspective. But anyway, Russell Conwell told a story called Acres of Diamonds. And in the Acre of Diamonds story, Russell Conwell told of a man named Al-Hafed, a man who lived in India hundreds of years ago. He had a beautiful property. He had cattle, he had crops, he had a stream running through the property. It was just a beautiful property. And Russell Conwell talks about the fact that at the beginning of the story, Al-Hafed went to bed happy and contented. A few days later, an old holy man from India came by and told Al-Hafed about diamonds. How if you just had one diamond of a certain value, your kids would have it made for life. And if you had a diamond mine, well, you could sit your kids on thrones throughout the world with its wealth. And so Al-Hafed went to bed that night unhappy and discontented. He was unhappy because he thought he was no longer rich. Nothing had changed. Al-Hafed still had the same thing he did before that priest came by, but he felt like he didn't. So what he did was he sold his property and he started on a world tour to try and find diamonds. Well, he finally got so discouraged after spending all of his money, his estate essentially, that he committed suicide. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, as they say, the new owner of Al-Hafed's property had found some stones in the white sands of this little creek that ran through Al-Hafed's old property and put them up on the mantle and to dry, and they were pretty, they were shiny. He didn't think much of it until this holy man came back on a visit. And he said, "Has Al-Hafed returned? You've got diamonds." And the man said, "No, he hadn't returned. And these aren't diamonds. These are just some pretty stones I took from the creek out back." And the priest said, "Well, whether he's returned or not, these are diamonds. I know diamonds." As it turned out, this was the initial discovery, as the legend goes, of the Golconda diamond mine in the southern peninsula of India. One of the richest, if not the richest, diamond mines in the world. You see, Al-Hafed became unhappy and discontent, not because he had lost anything, but because he felt like he could be wealthier when he had the wealth of kings in his own backyard. Don't forget, you're doing fine. You're a very blessed person. If you're able to save money and be able to put certain amounts of it into investments, you're doing well. Don't get so caught up in the day-to-days. There will be Black Fridays in lots of markets in lots of people's lives. If you can just get you a plan, ride out the storm, just look at it as your tuition or as your insurance account, and just go on with life with a different plan and a different mindset, I think you're going to do pretty good. But if not, let me assure you this, the silver market is not the market for you. As a matter of fact, if you want to get rich quick in anything, I just don't think you're going to be very satisfied in life. Well, that's the end of the story. Let me just give you a quick update of where we are today. We had started out this morning at $85.15, went as high as $88.06. So far, the low for the day is $71.36. So we've still got a fairly good $70 floor here. And when I checked last at 15 minutes after 2 o'clock Central Standard Time on February the 2nd of 2026, we were at $81. So we were down about $4 or 5% for the day. That'll give you an idea of where the market is for right now. But I appreciate your watching this video today. I hope it gives you some value and some things to think about as well as some places to look. But thanks for watching. If you have some comments, please do share them. I enjoy the comments and I try to get back to you as quick as I can on the recent videos. If you comment on the old ones, I might not ever see those, but the most recent one I try to get back on. So I appreciate that. Thank you for watching, and thanks to those of you who have subscribed. I genuinely appreciate that as well. Hope we'll see you again tomorrow. God bless.